The sound of Nathaniel Crawford's boots hitting the floor at 3 in the morning had become the rhythm by which she measured her survival. Nora Calloway plunged her reddened hands into the scalding water for what felt like the 1,000th time that night, watching grease and whiskey residue swirl away from another dirty glass. The Golden Spur Saloon in Linden, Kansas never seemed to run out of dishes, never seemed to close its doors long enough for her to catch more than a few hours of restless sleep on the thin mattress in the storage room upstairs. It was August of 1882, and the heat clung to everything like a second skin, making the already miserable work of scrubbing pots and plates feel like some kind of punishment handed down from above. She was 22 years old, and some days she felt ancient. "Girl, you need to move faster," Nathaniel Crawford barked from the doorway, his thick arms crossed over his barrel chest. He owned the saloon, and he never let Nora forget that he was doing her a favor by letting her work there at all. "We got another crowd coming in soon, and I need those glasses ready." Nora bit back the sharp retort that rose in her throat and simply nodded, scrubbing harder. Her father had died 6 months ago, leaving her with nothing but debts and a reputation in tatters. No respectable family in Linden would take her in, not when her father had been known as the town drunk who gambled away every cent he earned. The fact that he had also been kind and funny and had loved her fiercely meant nothing to anyone now that he was gone. So she washed dishes, slept in a storage room that smelled of stale beer and old tobacco, and tried not to think about the future stretching endlessly before her. The saloon doors swung open, and she heard the familiar sounds of men stumbling in, their laughter loud and alcohol-soaked. Through the doorway between the kitchen and the main room, she caught glimpses of cowboys and ranch hands, railroad workers and drifters, all looking for whiskey and cards and the company of the saloon girls who worked the floor. Nora kept her head down and her hands in the water. She had learned quickly that being invisible was the safest way to survive in a place like this. Nora, one of the saloon girls, a brassy blonde named Violet, poked her head into the kitchen. "We need more clean glasses out here. Crawford is having a fit." Nora dried her hands on her apron and hefted a tray of freshly washed glasses, following Violet back into the main room. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the smell of unwashed bodies and cheap perfume. She kept her eyes on the floor as she made her way to the bar, setting the glasses down carefully. The piano player was banging out a cheerful tune that seemed at odds with the exhaustion that weighed on Nora's shoulders. "Well now, who do we have here?" The voice was unfamiliar, deep and warm like sun-heated stones. Nora glanced up despite herself and found herself looking into a pair of startling blue eyes. The man standing at the bar was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the edges beneath his dusty hat. He wore the clothes of a working cowboy, sturdy denim and a worn leather vest, but there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested competence and quiet confidence. "Nobody," Nora said quickly, turning to head back to the kitchen. "Now that cannot be true," the cowboy said, and there was amusement in his voice but not cruelty. "Everybody is somebody." Nora did not respond, pushing through the kitchen door and letting it swing shut behind her. Her heart was beating faster than it should have been, and she was annoyed with herself for it. She had seen hundreds of cowboys come through the Golden Spur, and none of them had ever been anything but trouble. This one would be no different, no matter how blue his eyes were. She returned to her dishes, trying to lose herself in the monotonous rhythm of wash, rinse, dry. But her mind kept wandering back to those blue eyes, to the way he had spoken to her like she was worth speaking to. It was dangerous to think like that, she reminded herself. Hope was a luxury she could not afford. The night dragged on. Nora's back ached, her feet throbbed, and her hands were raw from the harsh lye soap. It was nearly 2 in the morning when Crawford finally told her she could stop for the night. She stumbled up the narrow stairs to the storage room, not bothering to light a candle. She knew the space well enough to navigate it in the dark. She collapsed onto the thin mattress, still wearing her stained dress, and fell into a dreamless sleep. Morning came too soon. Nora woke to sunlight streaming through the grimy window, and the sounds of the town coming to life outside. Her whole body ached as she pushed herself upright, and for a moment she let herself imagine what it would be like to simply stay in bed, to not face another day of endless dishes and Crawford's barking and the pitying looks from the saloon girls who at least got paid better than she did. But staying in bed would mean starving, and Nora had learned during the months after her father's death that hunger was worse than exhaustion. She dragged herself to her feet, splashed cold water from the basin on her face, and braided her long, dark hair. Her dress was stained and wrinkled, but it was the only one she owned that was still intact. She pulled on her apron and made her way downstairs. The saloon was quiet in the morning light, almost peaceful. The floors were sticky with spilled liquor, and the air still smelled of smoke, but without the crowds and the noise, it felt less oppressive. Nora found yesterday's dirty dishes waiting for her in the kitchen, along with a fresh pile from Crawford's breakfast. She sighed and got to work. She had been scrubbing for about an hour when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting to see Crawford or one of the saloon girls, and was startled to find the blue-eyed cowboy standing in the kitchen doorway. He looked better in the daylight, his face clean-shaven and his hair still damp as though he had just bathed. He was holding his hat in his hands, turning it slowly between his fingers. "Morning," he said, and his voice was just as warm as she remembered. "I hope I am not intruding." "The saloon does not open until noon," Nora said, turning back to her dishes. "You'll have to come back later if you want a drink." "I am not here for a drink," the cowboy said. "I am here to talk to you." Nora's hands stilled in the water. "Why would you want to do that?" "Because last night I saw a young woman working herself to the bone in this place, and I got to wondering about her story," he said simply. "My name is Cole Xanders. I have a ranch about 10 miles north of here." "Good for you," Nora said, resuming her scrubbing with renewed vigor. "I have dishes to wash." Cole Xanders did not leave. Instead, he stepped further into the kitchen, and Nora could feel his presence like heat from a fire. "I heard around town that you are living here, working for Crawford in exchange for room and board. That does not seem like much of a life." "It is the life I have," Nora said sharply. "Now, if you do not mind, I have work to do." "What if I told you there was another option?" Nora laughed, a bitter sound. "Men do not offer women like me options without expecting something in return. Whatever you are thinking, cowboy, the answer is no." "My name is Cole," he said patiently. "And I am not offering you what you think I am offering. I have a ranch that is doing well, but it is just me and my foreman running it. The house is too big for one person, and I could use someone to help with the cooking and the cleaning. It would be honest work with your own room and regular meals, no strings attached." Nora finally turned to face him fully, water dripping from her hands onto the floor. "Why would you do that? You do not even know me." Cole met her gaze steadily. "I know enough. I know you are working yourself sick in this place for a man who does not appreciate you. I know you deserve better than sleeping in a storage room and eating scraps. And I know that I could use the help, and you could use a real home." "A real home," Nora repeated softly. The words felt strange in her mouth, like a language she had forgotten how to speak. "Think about it," Cole said. "I will be in town for the rest of the day getting supplies. If you decide you are interested, you can find me at the general store this afternoon. If not, I will not bother you again." He settled his hat back on his head, tipped it to her in a gesture that was somehow both respectful and old-fashioned, and left the kitchen. Nora stared after him, her mind whirling. It was a trick, surely. Men did not offer jobs to strange women out of the goodness of their hearts, not in her experience. And yet something in Cole Xanders' voice had sounded genuine, almost earnest. She tried to push the encounter out of her mind and focus on her work, but it was impossible. All morning, as she scrubbed and dried and stacked, she found herself thinking about what he had said. A real home. Your own room. Regular meals. It sounded too good to be true, and everything in her life had taught her to be suspicious of things that sounded too good to be true. But what if it was real? What if this was her chance to escape the endless cycle of exhaustion and desperation that had become her life? Crawford came through the kitchen around midday, his face already flushed with drink even though the saloon had just opened. "You are slow today, girl. Pick up the pace, or I will find someone who can do the work properly." It was an empty threat. They both knew that no one else in Linden would work for the pittance he paid her, would accept sleeping in a storage room as part of their wages. But the casual cruelty in his voice made something inside Nora crack. "I quit," she heard herself say. Crawford blinked at her, his bleary eyes struggling to focus. "What did you say?" "I said I quit." Nora untied her apron with shaking hands and dropped it on the floor. "Find someone else to wash your dishes." "You cannot quit," Crawford sputtered. "You owe me for room and board. You think you can just walk out of here." "I do not owe you anything," Nora said, her voice stronger now. "I have worked every debt off twice over. I am leaving." She pushed past him, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She ran up the stairs to the storage room, grabbed the few possessions she owned and shoved them into a small cloth bag. She did not have much, just a change of clothes, a hairbrush that had been her mother's, and a small leather-bound book of poetry her father had given her when she was 12. Everything that mattered to her fit in a bag she could carry with one hand. Crawford was still shouting as she came back down the stairs, his face now purple with rage. "You will not find work anywhere else in this town. Everyone knows what your father was. You will come crawling back, mark my words." Nora did not respond. She walked out of the Golden Spur Saloon and into the bright afternoon sunlight, and she did not look back. The general store was at the other end of Linden's Main Street, past the church and the schoolhouse and the neat houses where respectable families lived. Nora walked with her head held high, ignoring the curious stares and whispered comments that followed her. She had spent the last 6 months being invisible, but now she felt blazingly visible, as though she were on fire. The general store was cool and dim after the heat of the street, and it smelled of leather and coffee and fresh cut wood. Nora stood just inside the door, letting her eyes adjust, and spotted Cole Xanders near the back. He was talking to the store owner, pointing at various items on the shelves. When he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that transformed him from handsome to something approaching beautiful. "You came," he said, walking toward her. "I am probably making a terrible mistake," Nora said bluntly. "But yes, I am interested in your offer if it is real." "It is real," Cole said. "I promise you that. Let me finish up here and we can head out to the ranch. I have a wagon outside." Nora nodded, her throat suddenly too tight for words. She watched as Cole paid for his supplies, noting the way the store owner treated him with respect, the way he seemed completely at ease. This was a man who knew his place in the world, who did not have to fight for every scrap of dignity. They loaded the supplies into a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 strong horses. Cole helped Nora up onto the bench seat, his hand warm and steady on her elbow, and then swung up beside her. He took the reins and clicked his tongue, and the horses started forward. Lyndon fell away behind them, and Nora felt something loosen in her chest. The prairie stretched out on either side of the road, golden in the August heat, dotted with scrub brush and the occasional stand of cottonwoods. The sky was impossibly blue, vast and empty and beautiful. It had been months since Nora had been outside of town, months since she had seen anything beyond the grimy walls of the saloon. "It is about an hour's ride," Cole said. "Are you comfortable?" "Yes," Nora said. Then, because she needed to know, she asked, "Why are you really doing this?" Cole was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the road ahead. "My mother died when I was 15, he said finally. "My father passed 2 years ago. I have been running the ranch on my own since then with help from my foreman, a man named Jack Torres. It is good work and I am proud of what I have built, but it gets lonely out there. And when I saw you last night working so hard in that place, I thought maybe we could help each other. You need a better situation, and I need someone to make that big empty house feel like a home again." There was something in his voice, a loneliness that echoed her own, that made Nora want to believe him. "What if it does not work out? What if you decide you made a mistake?" "Then we part ways, no harm done," Cole said, "but I do not think that will happen. I am a pretty good judge of character, and I think you are exactly the kind of person I need on my ranch." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the creaking of the wagon and the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves. Nora found herself relaxing despite her anxiety, lulled by the motion and the warmth of the sun on her face. "Tell me about your ranch," she said eventually. Cole's face brightened. "It is called the XXX Ranch. I have about 500 head of cattle right now, and I am hoping to expand next year. The house is solid, built by my grandfather when he first came out here in the 50s. It has 4 bedrooms, a big kitchen, a parlor, and a porch that wraps around 3 sides. There is a barn, a bunkhouse for the hands when I hire extra during roundup, and a good well that has never run dry." "It sounds wonderful," Nora said softly. "It is," Cole agreed. "It is the only place I have ever wanted to be. When my father died, I had offers to sell it, good offers, but I could not imagine giving it up. This land is in my blood." Nora understood that. Her father had loved Lyndon, had grown up there, had always insisted they would never leave no matter how bad things got. She wondered what he would think of her now, riding off with a stranger to a place she had never seen. She thought he would probably be relieved that she had found a way out of the Golden Spur. The ranch appeared on the horizon gradually, first as a dark smudge against the gold of the prairie, then resolving into buildings and fences. Cole had not exaggerated. The house was large and well-maintained, its white paint gleaming in the afternoon sun. The barn was a sturdy red structure, and Nora could see cattle grazing in the distance. It looked like a picture from a magazine, like the kind of place she had never imagined herself inhabiting. A man emerged from the barn as they approached, tall and lean with dark hair and sun-weathered skin that spoke of Mexican heritage. He raised a hand in greeting, and Cole waved back. "That is Jack," Cole said. "He has been with me since my father's time, best foreman in Kansas and a good friend." Jack helped them unload the wagon, his dark eyes curious as they rested on Nora. Cole made the introductions quickly. "Jack, this is Nora Calloway. She is going to be helping out around the house. Nora, this is Jack Torres. Pleased to meet you, miss," Jack said, tipping his hat. His voice carried a slight accent, his words careful and precise. "You too," Nora managed. Cole showed her into the house, and Nora had to stop herself from gasping. The interior was just as impressive as the exterior. with wide plank floors and high ceilings and windows that let in floods of light. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything was clean but had a dusty, unlived-in quality that spoke of a house where a lone man ate and slept but did not truly inhabit. "Your room is upstairs," Cole said, leading her up a staircase with a polished oak banister. "It is the one at the end of the hall. It was my sister's room before she married and moved to Denver." The room was larger than the entire storage space Nora had been living in at the saloon. It had a real bed with a thick mattress and a quilt in shades of blue and cream, a dresser with a mirror, a washstand with a porcelain basin and pitcher, and a window that looked out over the prairie. Nora set her small bag down on the bed and turned to Cole, not trusting herself to speak. "I know it is a lot to take in," Cole said gently. "Why do not you settle yourself and then come down to the kitchen when you are ready? I will show you around and we can talk about what your responsibilities would be." Nora nodded, and Cole left, closing the door softly behind him. Alone, Nora sank down onto the bed and let herself cry for the first time in months. They were not tears of sadness exactly, but rather tears of relief, of disbelief, of a cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, her luck had finally turned. She washed her face in the basin, using water from the pitcher that was cool and clean, and changed into her other dress, which was slightly less stained than the one she had been wearing. She brushed her hair and rebraided it, and then she went downstairs to face whatever came next. Cole was in the kitchen, which was enormous compared to the cramped space at the saloon. There was a large cast iron stove, a sturdy table with 6 chairs, and more cabinet space than Nora had ever seen. Sunlight streamed through the windows, making everything warm and golden. "Better?" Cole asked, looking up from the coffee he was making. "Yes," Nora said. "Thank you." "Have a seat," Cole said, gesturing to the table. "We should talk specifics." Nora sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. Cole poured 2 cups of coffee and brought them to the table, along with a plate of bread and butter. "Here is what I am thinking," Cole said. "You would be responsible for cooking meals, keeping the house clean, doing laundry, and helping with the garden when harvest time comes. I am not expecting you to work from dawn to dusk like you were at the saloon. Normal hours, normal work. In exchange, you get room and board and a salary of $20 a month." Nora stared at him. $20 a month was more than she had ever dreamed of earning. Crawford had paid her $5 a month and called it generous. "That is too much," she said automatically. "It is fair," Cole corrected. "You will be working hard and you deserve to be compensated properly. If you want to save money, maybe eventually buy some land of your own or start a business in town, you should be able to do that." "I do not know what to say," Nora admitted. "Say yes," Cole said, smiling. "Say you will give this a try and we will see how it goes." "Yes," Nora said. "Yes, I will try." They shook hands across the table, and Nora felt the warmth of his palm against hers, the calluses that spoke of hard work and long days. When he released her hand, she felt oddly bereft. The first few days at the XXX ranch passed in a blur of activity. Nora threw herself into her work with a fervor born of gratitude and determination. She scrubbed the house from top to bottom, washing windows and beating rugs and polishing furniture until everything gleamed. She cooked hearty meals of beef and potatoes and fresh bread, learning to use the large stove and discovering that she actually enjoyed cooking when she was not exhausted and rushed. She did laundry in the big copper tub behind the house, hanging sheets and shirts on the line to dry in the Kansas wind. Cole and Jack were out working the cattle most days, leaving before dawn and returning at sunset dusty and tired. Nora made sure there was hot water for washing and a good meal waiting when they came in. She found herself looking forward to those evenings, to the way Cole's face would light up when he saw what she had prepared, to the easy conversation around the dinner table. Jack was quieter than Cole, but he had a dry sense of humor that made Nora laugh. He had grown up in Texas, the son of Mexican immigrants, and had come to Kansas looking for work when he was 17. He and Cole's father had hit it off immediately, and Jack had stayed on the ranch ever since. He was in his early 30s now, unmarried and devoted to the Triple X with the same intensity Cole displayed. "You have made a real difference here already," Jack told Nora one evening as she served dinner. "The house feels lived in again. It is nice." "Thank you," Nora said, pleased. "He is right," Cole added. "I did not realize how much I missed this, having someone to come home to, having a house that smells like bread baking and feels warm." Nora felt her cheeks heat, and she busied herself with serving the stew. She was acutely aware of Cole in a way that was becoming harder to ignore. The way he moved with an easy grace despite his size, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way his voice softened when he spoke to her. She told herself it was just gratitude, that she was confusing appreciation for something deeper, but her heart did not seem to want to listen. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after Nora had arrived, a wagon pulled up to the house. Nora was in the garden, pulling weeds and checking on the late summer vegetables, when she heard voices. She stood, shading her eyes with her hand, and saw Cole talking to a woman in a blue dress. The woman was pretty, with blonde hair piled high on her head and a parasol to protect her fair skin from the sun. Nora felt an unexpected stab of something that felt uncomfortably like jealousy. She brushed dirt from her hands and walked toward the house, trying to compose herself. "Nora," Cole called when he saw her. "Come meet Mrs. Eleanor Winters. Eleanor, this is Nora Calloway, who is helping me run the house." "How do you do?" Eleanor said, her voice high and sweet. Her eyes, however, were assessing as they took in Nora's simple dress and work-roughened hands. "Very well, thank you," Nora said. "Eleanor and her husband have the ranch about 5 miles east of here," Cole explained. "She stopped by to invite us to a barn dance they are having next Saturday." "Oh, it will be such fun," Eleanor gushed. "Everyone from the surrounding ranches will be there." "You simply must come, Cole. And you too, of course, Miss Calloway." "I am not much for dancing," Nora said quickly. The thought of being surrounded by strangers, by people who might know about her father and her time at the saloon, made her stomach clench. "Nonsense," Eleanor said. "Everyone dances. It is a wonderful way to meet people. I insist you come." "We will think about it," Cole said smoothly. "Thank you for the invitation, Eleanor." After Eleanor had driven away, her parasol bobbing cheerfully, Cole turned to Nora. "You do not have to go if you do not want to. But it might be nice. A chance to relax, meet some of the neighbors." "Those people will not want to meet me," Nora said quietly. "They will know who I am, where I came from." "Then they will know you are a hard worker who deserves respect," Cole said firmly. "But truly, Nora, there is no pressure. We can stay home if you would prefer." The fact that he said "we" instead of "I" did not escape Nora's notice. The idea of Cole staying home from a social event because of her felt both touching and burdensome. "Maybe we could go for a little while," she heard herself say, "just to be polite." Cole's smile was warm enough to make her forget her anxiety. "Good. And for what it is worth, I think you will be the prettiest woman there." He said it casually, as though commenting on the weather, and then headed back toward the barn, leaving Nora standing in the garden with her heart racing and her cheeks burning. The week leading up to the barn dance passed quickly. Nora found herself thinking about it more than she wanted to admit, worrying about what she would wear, how she would act, whether people would whisper about her behind their hands. She owned nothing suitable for a social event, just her 2 work dresses that were now even more faded from constant washing. Cole must have noticed her anxiety, because 3 days before the dance, he came into the kitchen where she was kneading bread dough and set a wrapped package on the table. "What is this?" Nora asked, wiping her floury hands on her apron. "Open it and see," Cole said, looking pleased with himself. Nora untied the string and folded back the brown paper, revealing a dress in a soft green fabric that reminded her of new grass. It was simple but well made, with a modest neckline and long sleeves, and it was the most beautiful thing Nora had ever owned. "Cole, I cannot accept this," she said, even as her fingers itched to touch the fabric. "Of course you can," Cole said. "Consider it a work expense. You represent the XXX ranch now, and you should have something nice to wear." "This is too much," Nora protested. "It is not," Cole said firmly. "Please, Nora, let me do this. I want you to feel comfortable at the dance, and I know you were worried about what to wear." Nora looked at him, at the earnest expression on his face, and felt something shift inside her. "Thank you," she said softly. "This is very kind." "You are welcome," Cole said. "Now I should get back to work. Those fences will not mend themselves." Saturday evening arrived too quickly. Nora bathed in the copper tub, taking her time to scrub away the grime of the week, and then dressed carefully in the green dress. It fit perfectly, skimming her figure without being improper. She left her hair down, pinning back just the sides with the tortoiseshell combs her mother had worn. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked almost respectable, almost like someone who belonged in polite society. Cole was waiting at the bottom of the stairs when she came down, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. He was staring at her as though he had never seen her before, his blue eyes wide and his mouth slightly open. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you," Nora managed. "You clean up pretty well yourself." It was true. Cole had shaved and slicked his hair back, and he wore a clean white shirt with a black vest and trousers. He looked handsome and solid and completely trustworthy, and Nora felt a wave of affection for him that was becoming harder to deny. The drive to the Winters ranch was pleasant, the evening air cooling after the heat of the day. Cole kept up a steady stream of conversation, telling her about the various neighbors they would meet, trying to put her at ease. Nora appreciated the effort, even though her stomach was still twisted in knots. The barn had been cleared and decorated with lanterns and ribbons, and a small group of musicians was already playing when they arrived. There were at least 50 people milling about, talking and laughing, and Nora felt her courage start to fail. "Stay close to me," Cole murmured, placing a gentle hand on her lower back. "You will be fine." They made their way inside, and immediately Eleanor Winters descended on them, her face bright with curiosity. She introduced Nora to a dizzying array of people, ranchers and their wives, farmers, the local doctor, the schoolteacher. Most were polite, if a bit reserved, but Nora caught a few women whispering behind their hands, their eyes sharp with judgment. "Ignore them," Cole said quietly. "They are just bored and looking for gossip." The dancing started, and Cole led Nora onto the floor for a simple waltz. She was not a practiced dancer, but Cole was patient, guiding her through the steps with steady confidence. Gradually, Nora relaxed into the rhythm, letting herself enjoy the feeling of his hand on her waist, the way he looked at her as though she were the only person in the room. "See," Cole said. "This is not so bad." "No," Nora admitted. "It is actually rather nice." They danced 3 dances together, and then Cole was pulled away by some of the other ranchers who wanted to discuss cattle prices. Nora found herself standing near the refreshment table, sipping weak lemonade and trying not to feel self-conscious. "So you are working for Cole Xanders now." The voice came from behind her, and Nora turned to find a tall, angular woman with iron gray hair and a sharp face. She wore an expensive-looking black dress and had the air of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Yes, madam," Nora said. "I am his housekeeper." "Housekeeper," the woman repeated, her tone making it clear she doubted that was the whole story. "I heard you were washing dishes at the Golden Spur before this." "I was," Nora said, lifting her chin. "I am not ashamed of honest work." "Of course not," the woman said. "But you understand how it looks, a young woman living alone in a house with a bachelor. People will talk." "People always talk," Nora said. "Usually people who have nothing better to do." The woman's eyes narrowed. "You are impertinent." "I am honest," Nora corrected. "Now if you will excuse me." She walked away before the woman could respond, her heart pounding. She found Cole near the barn entrance, still talking cattle with a group of men, and hovered nearby until he noticed her. "Ready to go?" he asked, reading her expression. "If you do not mind," Nora said. Cole made their excuses, and they climbed back into the wagon. As they pulled away from the barn, Nora felt the tension drain from her shoulders. "What happened?" Cole asked. Nora told him about her encounter with the gray-haired woman, and Cole's expression darkened. "That was Mrs. Harriet Donovan. She is the biggest gossip in 3 counties and thinks her money gives her the right to pass judgment on everyone else. Do not pay her any attention." "She said people will talk about me living at your ranch," Nora said quietly. "Let them talk," Cole said firmly. "Anyone who knows me knows I would never behave dishonorably toward a woman under my protection. And anyone who does not know me well enough to know that does not matter." They rode in silence for a few minutes, and then Cole spoke again, his voice softer. "I am sorry if I put you in a difficult position by bringing you to the ranch. I genuinely did not think about how it might look to others. I just wanted to help you, and I needed the help." "You have nothing to apologize for," Nora said. "You have given me a chance when no one else would." "I do not care what small-minded people think." "Good," Cole said. "Because I think you are doing a wonderful job, and I am very glad you are here." The warmth in his voice wrapped around Nora like a blanket, and she felt something settle inside her. Whatever happened, whatever people said, this felt right. Being here, working on this ranch, spending time with this man, it all felt right in a way nothing had in years. As summer gave way to fall, Nora settled more deeply into life at the XXX Ranch. The days grew shorter and cooler, and the work shifted with the seasons. She helped bring in the last of the garden vegetables, preserving them in jars for the winter months. She made apple butter and pickles and put up tomatoes, filling the pantry with enough food to see them through until spring. She sewed curtains for the parlor and mended clothes, and learned to make the kind of hearty stews and roasts that would stick to a man's ribs when the weather turned cold. Cole and Jack were busy with the fall roundup, gathering the cattle and sorting them for market. They hired 3 extra hands for the work, and suddenly, Nora was cooking for 6 men instead of 3. It was exhausting but satisfying work, and the men were all grateful for the good food and the comfortable place to rest at the end of long days. One of the temporary hands, a young man named Billy with red hair and freckles, developed an obvious infatuation with Nora. He was only 19, shy and sweet, and he blushed every time she spoke to him. Nora was kind but distant, and she noticed that Cole seemed to find excuses to keep Billy working far from the house. "You are being ridiculous," Jack told Cole one evening when he thought Nora could not hear. They were on the porch, and Nora was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. "The boy is harmless." "I know that," Cole said. "I just do not want Nora to be uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable," Jack repeated, and there was amusement in his voice. "That is what you are calling it. What else would I call it?" Cole asked, but he sounded defensive. "How about jealous?" Jack suggested. "How about you finally admitting that you have feelings for that woman and doing something about it?" There was a long silence, and Nora held her breath, straining to hear Cole's response. "It is not that simple," Cole said finally. "She works for me. I do not want her to feel pressured or obligated, and she has been through enough without me adding complications to her life." "Maybe you should let her decide what she wants," Jack said. "You might be surprised." Nora moved away from the window, her heart racing. So Cole had feelings for her. She had suspected, had hoped, but hearing it confirmed made it real. And now she had to decide what to do with that information. The truth was, she had fallen in love with Cole Xanders. It had happened gradually, sneaking up on her over the weeks and months. She loved the way he treated everyone with respect, from Jack to the ranch hands to the animals in his care. She loved his quiet competence, the way he could fix anything and never complained about hard work. She loved his kindness, the way he had seen her struggling and offered her a way out without expecting anything in return. She loved the sound of his laugh, rare but genuine. She loved the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she was not paying attention, with a hunger and tenderness that made her knees weak. But Jack was right that it was complicated. She was Cole's employee, dependent on him for food and shelter and income. If she told him how she felt and he did not feel the same way, or worse, if he felt obligated to reciprocate, it would ruin everything. And if they did start something and it ended badly, she would lose not just a job but a home, and she would be right back where she started. The dilemma kept her awake at night, staring at the ceiling of her comfortable room and wishing things were simpler. The first snow came in late October, earlier than usual. Nora woke one morning to find the world transformed, covered in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and new. She stood at her bedroom window, watching the flakes fall, and felt a childlike sense of wonder. Snow had always been her favorite, back when her father was alive, and they would spend winter evenings reading by the fire. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to start breakfast. Cole was already in the kitchen, feeding wood into the stove. He looked up when she entered and smiled. "First snow," he said. "It is early this year." "It is beautiful," Nora said. "It is," Cole agreed, "but it means winter is really coming. We will need to make sure we have enough firewood stacked and that all the livestock are secure." After breakfast, Nora bundled up in a coat Cole had bought her and went outside to help. The cold air bit at her cheeks, but the snow was soft and lovely, crunching under her boots. She helped Cole and Jack move the horses into the barn and make sure the cattle had access to shelter and water that would not freeze. By midday, they were all cold and tired, and Nora made hot coffee and thick sandwiches. They ate in the warm kitchen, and Nora felt a sense of contentment that was almost painful in its intensity. "This," she thought, "this is what home feels like." "I was thinking," Cole said as they finished eating, "we should go into Linden before the weather gets too bad. Stock up on supplies for the winter, make sure we have everything we need." "That sounds wise," Jack said. "Nora, would you want to come?" Cole asked. "You could pick up anything you need, and I thought we might stop by the dress shop. You could use some warmer clothes for the winter." "You do not need to buy me anything else," Nora protested. "You have already been too generous." "It is not generosity," Cole said. "It is practicality. You cannot work if you are freezing. Let me take care of this." They made the trip to Linden 2 days later after the roads had been cleared. The town looked different in the snow, almost picturesque, though Nora still felt a twist of anxiety as they passed the Golden Spur. She wondered if Crawford had found someone else to wash his dishes, and then decided she did not care. Cole took her to the dress shop, where a kind older woman helped her pick out 2 warm wool dresses, a heavy coat, and sturdy boots. Cole also insisted on buying her gloves and a scarf, ignoring her protests. At the general store, they loaded up on flour and sugar and coffee, on canned goods and dried beans, on all the staples they would need to get through the winter. As they were loading the wagon, a man approached them. He was tall and lean, with a sharp face and cold eyes, and he wore a badge on his chest that identified him as a deputy. "Cole Xanders," the man said. "Heard you had that Calloway girl working for you." "Miss Calloway is my housekeeper," Cole said, his voice carefully neutral. "Is there a problem, Deputy Matthews?" "No problem," Matthews said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Just seems strange, a respectable rancher taking in a girl like that. Her father died owing money all over town, you know. Bad blood." Nora felt her face burn, but Cole stepped between her and the deputy, his body language suddenly protective. "Nora Calloway is a hard worker and a good person, and she is not responsible for her father's debts," Cole said, his voice hard. "If anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with me." Matthews held up his hands. "No need to get defensive, just making conversation." "Well, this conversation is over," Cole said. "Come on, Nora." He helped her into the wagon, and they left Linden without another word. Nora could feel Cole's anger radiating off him in waves, and she felt a surge of affection for him. He had defended her without hesitation, had put himself between her and cruelty. "Thank you," she said quietly as they left the town behind. "You do not need to thank me," Cole said. "I will not stand by and let people treat you poorly. You deserve better than that." "You are a good man, Cole Xanders," Nora said. Cole glanced at her, and something passed between them, a current of understanding and connection that made Nora's breath catch. She wanted to reach out and take his hand, wanted to tell him everything she was feeling, but fear held her back. They made it back to the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the snow-covered prairie in shades of pink and gold. Jack helped them unload the wagon, and they all worked together to put away the supplies and settle the horses. By the time they finished, it was full dark, and the temperature had dropped sharply. Nora made a simple dinner of soup and bread, and they ate by the fire in the parlor, the 3 of them companionably quiet. Jack excused himself early, saying he wanted to check on the bunkhouse stove before bed, and suddenly, Nora was alone with Cole. "Today was difficult," Cole said, staring into the fire. "I am sorry you had to deal with Matthews. He is a small man who likes to make himself feel big by belittling others." "I am used to it," Nora said. "People have been judging me since my father died." "You should not have to be used to it," Cole said. He turned to look at her, and his blue eyes were intense in the firelight. "You are one of the best people I know, Nora. You are kind and hard-working and brave. You took a chance on a stranger offering you a job, and you have made this place a home. I do not know what I did to deserve having you here, but I am grateful every day." Nora's heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear herself think. "Cole," she said, and then stopped, not knowing how to continue. "I know this is complicated," Cole said. "I know you work for me, and I do not want you to feel like I am taking advantage, but I need you to know that I care about you, more than I should, probably. More than is smart or sensible. I care about you, Nora, and I have since the first night I saw you washing dishes in that saloon." "I care about you too," Nora whispered. "I have been so afraid to say it, afraid it would ruin everything, but I do. I care about you so much." Cole reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle. "Then maybe we could see where this goes. No pressure, no expectations. Just 2 people who care about each other, taking it slow and seeing what happens." "I would like that," Nora said. Cole smiled, and then he leaned in slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away. When his lips met hers, it was soft and sweet and perfect. Nora felt like she was melting, like every hard edge inside her was softening. When they finally broke apart, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for so long," he murmured. "Me too," Nora admitted. They sat by the fire for another hour, holding hands and talking in low voices about everything and nothing. When Nora finally went up to bed, she felt like she was floating. Over the next few weeks, as winter settled in earnest over the XXX ranch, Nora and Cole's relationship deepened. They were careful around Jack at first, not wanting to make things awkward, but Jack just rolled his eyes and said it was about time. They stole moments alone whenever they could, standing close in the kitchen while Nora cooked, taking walks in the snow, sitting together by the fire in the evenings. Cole was a patient and attentive suitor. He brought Nora wildflowers he found somehow thriving despite the cold. He read to her from books of poetry in the evenings. He taught her to ride horseback, even though she was terrified at first, and cheered when she finally managed to gallop across the pasture without falling off. He told her about his parents, about growing up on the ranch, about his dreams for the future. And he listened when she talked about her father, about the good times before the drinking got bad, about her mother who had died when Nora was 8. Christmas came, and Nora decorated the house with pine boughs and made a feast of roast beef and mashed potatoes and apple pie. Cole gave her a beautiful leather-bound journal and a set of watercolor paints. "I thought you might like to try painting," he said. "You are always talking about how pretty the prairie is. You should capture it." Nora gave him a scarf she had knitted in secret, working on it in her room late at night. It was not perfect, but Cole wore it every day, and that felt like a victory. On New Year's Eve, as 1882 turned into 1883, Cole kissed Nora at midnight and asked her to marry him. "I know it is fast," he said, "and I know we are still getting to know each other, but I cannot imagine my life without you in it, Nora. You have made me happier than I have been in years. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Nora said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married in early February, in a small ceremony at the ranch. Jack stood as Cole's best man, and Violet, the saloon girl from the Golden Spur who had always been kind to Nora, agreed to stand with Nora. The justice of the peace from Linden performed the ceremony, and afterward they had a simple celebration with a few friends and neighbors. Even Alina Winters came, and she was gracious enough to congratulate them warmly. Mrs. Harriet Donovan did not attend, but Nora did not care. She was marrying the man she loved, and nothing else mattered. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, Cole patient with Nora's nervousness. They lay together afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, and talked until dawn about the life they would build together. Spring came slowly to Kansas, but when it finally arrived, it brought with it a sense of renewal and hope. The snow melted, revealing green grass and early wildflowers. The cattle grew fat on the new growth, and Cole hired hands for the spring roundup. Nora planted a bigger garden than she had the previous year, dreaming of jars of pickles and tomatoes and apple butter filling the pantry. One morning in May, Nora woke feeling queasy. She barely made it to the wash basin before she was sick. Cole was immediately concerned, wanting to ride to Linden for the doctor, but Nora stopped him. "I do not think I need a doctor," she said, a smile tugging at her lips. "I think I am with child." Cole's face went through a series of emotions so quickly Nora almost laughed. Shock, disbelief, and then pure joy. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing like a child himself. "A baby," he said. "We are going to have a baby." "We are," Nora confirmed. The pregnancy was not easy. Nora was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep food down. Cole fussed over her constantly, and Jack took over much of the cooking so Nora could rest. But gradually, the sickness passed, and Nora began to bloom. Her belly grew round, and she felt the baby kick and move inside her. Cole would spend evenings with his hand on her stomach, marveling at each flutter and punch. "Hello in there," he would say, his voice soft. "This is your father. We cannot wait to meet you." Nora had never been happier. The fears and doubts that had plagued her when she first came to the ranch had faded, replaced by a bone-deep sense of security and love. She was building a family, a real family, and it felt like a miracle. Their son was born in late December, during a snowstorm that seemed determined to bury the ranch. The labor was long and difficult, with only Cole and Jack and the midwife from Linden to help. Nora thought she might die from the pain, but then she heard a baby crying and nothing else mattered. "It is a boy," the midwife said, placing the squalling infant on Nora's chest. "A healthy boy." Nora looked down at her son, at his tiny red face and shock of dark hair, and felt her heart expand until she thought it might burst. Cole was beside her, tears streaming down his face, reaching out to touch their son with trembling fingers. "He is perfect," Cole whispered. "You are perfect. Thank you, Nora. Thank you for this gift." They named him Samuel after Cole's father, Samuel Cole Xanders, heir to the XXX Ranch. The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and endless diaper changes, and a love so fierce it was almost frightening. Nora had never known she could feel this way, so protective and devoted. Samuel was a good baby, mostly quiet and content, with Cole's blue eyes and Nora's dark hair. He smiled early and laughed often, and both Cole and Jack doted on him shamelessly. As Samuel grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Cole expanded his herd and bought more land, and the XXX became known as one of the best-run operations in the area. Nora took on the ranch's bookkeeping, discovering she had a head for numbers, and together she and Cole made decisions about the business. When Samuel was 3, Nora became pregnant again. This time, she was less anxious, more confident in her body's ability to bring forth life. Their daughter, Rose, was born on a warm spring day, and she came into the world with a lusty cry and a head full of red gold curls that seemed to come from nowhere. "She is going to be a handful," Jack predicted, and he was right. Rose was bold and fearless, climbing everything she could reach and leading her older brother into all kinds of mischief. But she was also affectionate and funny, and she had Cole wrapped around her tiny finger. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and work and love. Samuel grew tall and serious, with his father's steady nature and his mother's sharp mind. Rose grew wild and beautiful, more comfortable in the barn than the house, learning to ride almost before she could walk. Nora gave birth to a second son, Thomas, when Rose was 4, and then 2 years later to another daughter, Grace. The house that had once been too big and empty was now filled with noise and laughter and the chaos of children. Nora sometimes thought back to her days washing dishes at the Golden Spur, and it felt like another lifetime, like a story that had happened to someone else. She had been so desperate then, so hopeless, and now she had everything she had ever dreamed of and more. Cole was a devoted husband and father. He taught Samuel how to ride and rope and run the ranch. He played endless games with Rose, pretending to be a horse or a bear or whatever creature her imagination demanded. He rocked Thomas to sleep when the boy had nightmares, and he sang lullabies to Grace in a surprisingly sweet voice, and he loved Nora with a constancy that never wavered. Even after years of marriage, he still brought her wildflowers. He still read to her by the fire. He still looked at her sometimes like she was the most amazing thing he had ever seen. One evening, when Samuel was 10 and Grace was just learning to walk, Nora stood on the porch watching the sun set over the prairie. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and gold, and the air smelled of grass and horses and home. Cole came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How lucky I am," Nora said. "How different my life could have been." "You made your own luck," Cole said. "You were brave enough to take a chance on me, brave enough to leave a bad situation even though you did not know what would happen next." "I was terrified," Nora admitted. "That first day riding out to the ranch with you, I was sure I was making a terrible mistake." "And now?" Cole asked. "Now I know it was the best decision I ever made," Nora said. She turned in his arms to face him, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. "You gave me a home, Cole. You gave me a family. You gave me a life worth living." "You gave me the same," Cole said. "I was lonely before you came, even if I did not realize it. You filled this house with love and warmth. You gave me children and purpose and happiness. I thank God every day that I walked into that saloon and saw you washing dishes." They kissed, slow and sweet, the kind of kiss that came from years of practice and deep affection. Behind them, they could hear the children playing in the house, Samuel trying to teach Rose to read while Thomas built towers of blocks and Grace babbled happily. "We should go in," Nora said reluctantly. "It is almost bedtime." "In a minute," Cole said, holding her close. "Let me just hold you for one more minute." So they stood there on the porch of the XXX ranch, watching the sun sink below the horizon, wrapped in each other's arms and surrounded by the sounds of their children. The prairie stretched out before them, endless and beautiful, full of possibility. Nora thought about the girl she had been, scrubbing dishes in a dingy saloon kitchen, believing she had no future beyond survival. She thought about Cole offering her a chance, a real home, when she had expected nothing from life. She thought about falling in love, about building a family, about discovering that happiness was not just possible but abundant. The years continued to unfold with a gentle grace. Jack eventually married a widow from Linden, a kind woman named Maria who had 2 children of her own. They built a house on the edge of the XXX property, and suddenly there were even more children running wild through the ranch. Samuel and Jack's stepson, a boy named Miguel, became inseparable friends, and Rose appointed herself protector of Jack's stepdaughter, Carmen. The children grew and changed. Samuel, at 16, was already as tall as his father and showed every sign of being an excellent rancher. He was responsible and hardworking, and Cole began teaching him the business side of the ranch, preparing him to take over someday. Rose, at 13, was still fearless, but she had developed a talent for breaking horses that was remarkable to watch. Thomas, at 9, was quieter than his siblings, preferring books to ranch work, and Nora encouraged his love of learning, thinking he might someday become a teacher or a lawyer. Grace, at 7, was the peacemaker of the family, always smoothing over arguments and making sure everyone was happy. When Samuel was 18, he fell in love with the new school teacher, a sweet girl named Anna who had come from Missouri. Cole and Nora gave their blessing, and the young couple was married the following spring. They built a small house near the main ranch house, and Samuel began taking on more responsibility for the day-to-day operations. Rose showed no interest in settling down, much to Alina Winter's dismay. Alina had a nephew she was constantly trying to push on Rose, but Rose had no patience for him or any other boy who could not keep up with her in the saddle. "I will marry when I find someone worth marrying," she announced one day at dinner, "and not before." Nora and Cole exchanged amused glances. Their daughter knew her own mind, and they would not force her into anything. The ranch continued to thrive. Cole bought more land, expanding the Triple X until it was one of the largest spreads in Kansas. But he never forgot his roots, never forgot what it was like to struggle. He was fair with his employees, paying them well and treating them with respect. He gave young men chances when others would not, just as he had given Nora a chance years before. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Cole surprised Nora with a trip to Denver. It was her first time leaving Kansas since she was a child, and she was nervous and excited in equal measure. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in restaurants, and went to the theater. Cole bought her a beautiful gold locket, and inside he placed tiny photographs of their 4 children. "So you can carry them with you always," he said. "As if I need a reminder," Nora said, but she was touched. She wore the locket every day after that, and it became her most treasured possession. On the train ride home, Nora looked out the window at the passing landscape and thought about her life. She was 42 years old now, with gray threading through her dark hair and lines around her eyes from years of smiling. Her hands were still work-roughened, though not nearly as raw as they had been in her saloon days. She was not the desperate girl she had been, but she was not entirely different either. She was still a survivor, still someone who knew the value of hard work and second chances. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked. He was sitting beside her, holding her hand, looking older himself with silver at his temples and deeper creases around his eyes. "Everything," Nora said. "Nothing. How strange life is. 20 years ago, I was washing dishes and sleeping in a storage room, believing that was all I deserved. And now I have this beautiful life, this family, this man who loves me. It still does not feel quite real sometimes." "It is real," Cole assured her. "Every bit of it. And you deserve all of it, Nora. You always have." They arrived back at the ranch to find their children had organized a surprise party. The house was decorated with ribbons and flowers, and there was a feast laid out that the children had cooked themselves, with help from Maria and Anna. Friends and neighbors filled the house, all there to celebrate Cole and Nora's 20 years together. "Speech," someone called, and soon everyone was chanting for Cole to say something. Cole stood, pulling Nora up beside him. He cleared his throat, suddenly looking nervous in a way he rarely did. "I am not much for speeches," he began, and everyone laughed. "But I will say this. 20 years ago, I walked into a saloon and saw a young woman working harder than anyone I had ever seen. She was trying to survive in a world that had not been kind to her, and something about her determination touched my heart. I offered her a job, and she took a chance on me on this ranch, on a life she could not have imagined. And in doing so, she gave me everything I never knew I needed. Nora Xanders is the bravest, kindest, strongest woman I know. She is an incredible mother, a brilliant partner, and the love of my life. I thank God every day that she said yes when I offered her a real home, and I thank God even more that she agreed to make that home with me forever." There was not a dry eye in the house, including Nora's. She hugged Cole tightly, and the crowd erupted in applause and cheers. The years continued their steady march. Samuel and Anna had 3 children of their own, making Cole and Nora grandparents. Rose finally met her match in a horse trader from Wyoming, a man as fearless and wild as she was, and they married in a ceremony that was more party than wedding. Thomas went away to college in Missouri, returning with a degree and a passion for law. Grace married young at 19 to a neighboring rancher's son, and they were so clearly in love that Nora could not help but approve despite her daughter's youth. The Triple X ranch passed from Cole's hands to Samuel's, though Cole remained active and involved for many years. He taught his grandsons to ride and rope, just as he had taught his own children, and he spent long hours on the porch with Nora, watching the prairie and counting their blessings. They faced hardships, as all lives do. A harsh winter in the early 1890s killed off part of the herd. Thomas, for all his success as a lawyer, struggled with melancholy and spent a difficult year fighting his own demons before finding peace. Rose had 2 miscarriages before finally carrying a pregnancy to term, and those losses nearly broke her. But the family rallied around each other, supporting and loving through the dark times until light returned. One summer evening, when Nora was 60 years old and Cole was 62, they sat together on the porch swing Cole had built for their 30th anniversary. Their hair was silver now, their faces deeply lined, but their eyes were still bright and their love still strong. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked suddenly. "Taking a chance on me, leaving Linden and coming out here?" "Never," Nora said immediately. "Not for a single moment." "Do you regret offering me that job?" "It was the smartest thing I ever did," Cole said. "Well, that and convincing you to marry me," Nora laughed. "You did not have to do much convincing, as I recall." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the prairie they both loved. Somewhere in the house behind them, their grandchildren were playing, filling the air with laughter and noise. Samuel and Anna lived in the old house with them now, and Rose and her family visited often, and Thomas came when he could, and Grace lived close enough to drop by nearly every day. "We built something good here," Cole said softly. "You and me together, we built something that will last." "We did," Nora agreed. She reached over and took his hand, their fingers intertwining as easily as they had 40 years ago. "We built a home." As darkness fell and the stars began to appear in the vast Kansas sky, Cole and Nora remained on the porch, holding hands and remembering. They remembered that first meeting in the saloon, remembered the terrifying ride out to the ranch, remembered falling in love slowly and then all at once. They remembered their wedding and the birth of their children and every triumph and tragedy that had followed. But mostly they remembered that a single act of kindness, of one person seeing another's struggle and offering help, had changed everything. It had transformed 2 lonely people into a family, had turned a house into a home, had created a legacy that would endure for generations. Cole leaned over and kissed Nora's cheek, a gesture as natural as breathing after all these years. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," Nora replied. "Always." And as they sat together in the gathering darkness, surrounded by the life they had built and the love they had cultivated, they knew with absolute certainty that they had found what everyone searches for. They had found home, had found each other, and had discovered that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin in the most unlikely places. Years later, when Cole passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Nora grieved deeply, but found comfort in knowing that they had made the most of every year they had been given. She lived another 6 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them carrying forward the legacy of love and hard work and kindness that she and Cole had established. On her final day, propped up in the bed she had shared with Cole for so many years, Nora looked around at her family gathered close. Samuel held one hand, Rose held the other, while Thomas and Grace stood at the foot of the bed. Grandchildren filled every available space, and great-grandchildren played quietly in the corners. "Tell us the story again, Grandma," one of the great-grandchildren asked. "About how you met Grandpa." Nora smiled, her voice weak but steady. "I was washing dishes at a saloon to survive," she began, just as she had begun the story 100 times before. "And a cowboy walked in and offered me a real home." "And then what happened?" the child asked, even though they all knew the answer. Then, Nora said, her eyes drifting closed, I lived happily ever after. And she did.